Huge announcement yesterday. GameStop announced their earnings, and there was a nice little piece of reporting there that they actually changed their investment policy to be able to allow GameStop to invest in Bitcoin specifically. And there was a lot of speculation leading up to this. There was a picture of Ryan Cohen, the CEO of GameStop, with Saylor. He followed a couple Bitcoin accounts on Twitter, and we kind of knew that this was going to happen, or speculate that this was going to happen, and now we have evidence that this is reality. So they actually had two press releases on their investor relations, and this is the top one. This is specifically they cut this out of the other press release to show that this was very important to them to share. So I'll just read it out to you guys, and we'll kind of talk about it. It says, GameStop Corp today announced that its board has unanimously approved an update to its investment policy to add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset.
Yeah, that's crazy. I don't even really care about GameStop as a company. I'm more concerned about how many entities can buy this much Bitcoin. So they have how much cash did you say that they have?
Yeah, so their reported cash and cash equivalents was around $4.7 billion. There it is right
Wow.
there, February 1st, 2025.
So let's say they start buying Bitcoin in chunks, and they just keep buying until they give all this cash away. They could probably get like 40,000 Bitcoin, 40,000, depending on how much they bring the price up. So they
Yeah.
could get like 40,000 Bitcoin, which is crazy. And well, we were just talking about the numbers before. A very small number of entities can actually hold 40,000 Bitcoin. So just that alone is going to, I mean, that differentiates them.
Well, what's crazy is there's actually only two public companies that hold more than 40,000 Bitcoin today. So they could easily become either second or third, right? If they were able to get Bitcoin at an average price of 90K and they dumped all of that cash in there, they would actually have 52,000 Bitcoin. I think them buying, obviously, I think an average price of 90K would probably be low. So they're probably going to have to pay more for it if they start buying in size. But that puts them high up there on that list.
I think the thing that stood out for me most was the unanimous decision to buy Bitcoin as the board. I feel, as Forrest mentioned there, this has kind of been in the works for a little while. We saw the picture with Ryan Cohen, the CEO, with Saylor. So obviously this is kind of going on in the background for a while now. And I was kind of curious myself to see how much pushback the board would receive from about buying Bitcoin. And to me, it makes a lot of sense. I think most people are fairly familiar with GameStop's history, their business model. What do you guys where do you think that they go from this? Assuming that they allocate a large portion of their cash, it seems like they're going to be taking that route based on the press release, the coverage on it so far, how much emphasis they're putting on it, the unanimous aspect of it. So assuming that they allocate a large portion of that 4.7 billion into Bitcoin, where do you guys think the company goes from there? Do they turn into like a MicroStrategy? Do they continue with their operations and just hold Bitcoin kind of in the background? Where do you guys think they go from here?
I think they have like that meme. It's just a meme right now. So I think people will keep buying their stock. They'll keep buying. If they keep issuing more shares and they keep buying Bitcoin the way that MicroStrategy is doing it, I mean, if they use the premium that they have right now, there is 0 Bitcoin, so it's all premium in terms of Bitcoin. But if they keep using the premium, they can keep issuing more shares, accumulating more and more Bitcoin. Like they could get to 100,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah, they could. I mean, so there's a few things there that I think of right away. They basically issued a ton of shares when the meme stock frenzy happened, and that's kind of it's responsible to them as a company, as a board, because it allowed them to avoid bankruptcy. They raised a huge amount of cash. That those billions of dollars is not from being a profitable business. They're barely profitable, and a lot of their profits is actually from divesting a lot of their company, from selling storefronts and things like that. So they raised a ton of cash. They have that cash. They're sitting on that cash. They've basically become like almost like a startup. And it was kind of the investors were thinking, okay, what is Ryan Cohen going to use this money for to make a profitable business? Is it acquisitions? Is it whatever, right? So now with this Bitcoin, being able to buy Bitcoin, this seems like the road they're going to go. They're currently their MNAV, so they're multiple to the net asset value, and I'm evaluating their cash as their net asset value is 2.4 multiple. So if they sold shares, they'd be able to basically sell, or they'd be able to buy, $2.40 for selling $1. Is one way to look at it, and they could immediately buy Bitcoin with it. So they have a higher multiple than Strategy does, and they could implement the exact same strategy that Strategy does. But yeah, I mean, this to me, like, if you look again into their filings, they sold all of their Italy stores. They shut down all their stores in Germany. They're just trying to become profitable and consolidate, and they need to be able to buy growth off the shelf. And if they tap into Bitcoin, with FASB's new fair value accounting for digital assets, if Bitcoin goes up while they hold it on their balance sheet, they'll look even more profitable. So this is definitely an option for them, and they could do all sorts of strategies beyond just selling ATM shares into the market as well.
So do you think that they will become something similar to Strategy? Because I'm kind of trying to envision in my own head what a meeting between Ryan Cohen and Michael Saylor would look like. I think as retail investors in Bitcoin, as kind of I don't know what you'd call us, shrimps in the market, we see things differently a little bit, than Ryan Cohen would. It'd be very hard to allocate $4 billion into Bitcoin. Like, where do you start? You don't just create a Bitcoin well account and buy $4 billion worth of Bitcoin. So he's obviously getting some insights in terms of like how to acquire the Bitcoin, how to obtain it, how to get, allocate your cash towards Bitcoin. But they got to be thinking some sort of strategy, kind of what you're going there with, Forrest, is like, are they going to turn into like a new MicroStrategy that's a little bit more, or strategy, sorry, a little bit more well recognized within the investment world? Because before MicroStrategy at the time, before they started buying Bitcoin, like hardly anybody knew about this company. And I think it took a lot of time for people to really realize what's going on here. And it just kind of seemed like maybe a scam. A lot of people still think it is a scam or a pyramid scheme, but GameStop has that recognition and brand recognition where I think this is going to bring a lot of people into it that wouldn't have looked at Strategy otherwise. So do you think that there's a chance that this GameStop actually turns into something more away from the video game aspect and into like the Bitcoin treasury company?
You know what I think about right away is they could go one of two routes, right? They could go the route of Strategy, or they could go the route of Tesla. Tesla just bought Bitcoin. They actually let his hands and sold at the bottom, and they've just held on to a bit of Bitcoin. It's not really a big part of their business. It's just, but Tesla's focused on AI. They're focused on cyber or robo taxis, all this, right? So they're kind of like a business that has a lot of potential in the future. I think GameStop does not have a lot of potential in the future. As much as we love going to a store and buying video games, or it's like a nostalgic thing, I don't think that has legs into the future. So to me, I think if we only had those two examples, then it would be really up to debate. But we actually have a lot more examples of companies following Strategy and seeing huge outsized returns from it. So Semler did the same thing. They issued converts. They did ATMs. Meta Planet did the same thing. Cooler is now doing the same thing. And they, as soon as they were able to start buying Bitcoin, they actually started acting pretty quickly on it. And their stock price has appreciated like crazy. Each one of those has done really well. So to me, it just seems like a no-brainer. They're now able to buy Bitcoin. Why not buy a ton of it? Why not double down on it? Why not become a Bitcoin treasury company that can acquire a ton of this very valuable asset? It just makes total sense to do so. If they don't, I think it's really stupid of them to not actually follow the strategy.
Yeah, once you figure out what Bitcoin is, it just makes no sense not to use your ability to borrow money to issue shares and buy Bitcoin. It's just dumb at that point.
Yeah.
If I had a public company that I was managing, I would definitely want to buy Bitcoin by using my position in the equity markets, by using my credit in the bond markets. Why wouldn't you? What reason do you have not to? Unless you don't understand Bitcoin. I think that's the differentiator. Maybe people who are running those massive companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, maybe they don't actually understand what Bitcoin is.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid comment, Rajat. And I think, well, we did a video on Bill Gates not too long ago of whether or not he understands it. But kind of where my mind goes with this, with GameStop, I think that this will only last for so long. Like we've seen MicroStrategy have so much success because I see that as like the canary in the coal mine. That's the signal that there's a whole large pool of capital out there that wants to buy Bitcoin. They can't. We just saw the policy, the investment policy of GameStop. That's a perfect example of why MicroStrategy has been so successful, because a lot of these big entities, they actually can't hold Bitcoin. They can't do it within their investment policy. GameStop updated theirs, but there's a whole large swath of capital out there who wants to buy Bitcoin, and they've been using companies like Strategy to buy that Bitcoin on their behalf. That's what's created these premiums. That's why there's been so much demand for their products. I don't think that lasts forever per se. Like it's not going to be an endless amount of companies who can take that strategy. I kind of see this more along the lines of like a business like GameStop, who's kind of like on the downtrend. Instead of, you got 4 billion cash, you got to allocate that to projects. Your shareholders are expecting you to turn that into something for them, right? That's what his job is there, to allocate whatever capital they have into projects. And I think if you look at projects and locations and strategies, nothing is going to beat Bitcoin in the short term anyways. You're comparing projects now to a 60% hurdle rate. And so for companies like GameStop, I think the plan going forward is just going to be get some Bitcoin while you can. Hold on to that, wait for the right time, wait for the opportunity. And then if you need to allocate some of that Bitcoin for a certain opportunity or a project, I think that's how this is going to play out, instead of all these companies actually turning into strategy mini versions of that. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Bitcoin just gives you that time to wait, to make your decisions, so you don't have to make impulse decisions. You don't have to sell your Bitcoin at the very bottom. You don't have to sell your Bitcoin at the top. You can use it whenever you have an opportunity. Like in the current system, no matter what happens, Walmart is always going to try to open up more Walmarts. McDonald's is always going to try to open up more McDonald's. If it works in their business, if they can get out that extra 1 or 2% in profits, they're always going to do it, because that's just what the system incentivizes. Because they know that if they were to buy more more real estate, not rental properties, more land, more real estate properties, they're going to eventually break even, or they're going to do very well. Like McDonald's today, they're not. What's the difference between McDonald's and MicroStrategy? McDonald's makes most of their money from their real estate holdings. It's not like they make money from burgers; they make money from real estate holdings. What's the difference between them and GameStop? If GameStop starts buying as much Bitcoin as they can, I know McDonald's has a profitable business, but GameStop's Bitcoin is going to be much more profitable than McDonald's burger business at some point. And what's the difference between those two? If you really think of it logically, this is what people are already doing in the current system. And the companies that are doing it now with Bitcoin are just getting hated on for no reason.
Yeah. There's another side to this as well. They have around 3,000 storefronts. If they adopt Bitcoin as a treasury reserve, maybe they'll implement some sort of Bitcoin in their business as well. Imagine, GameStop could have Bitcoin ATMs, or you could buy games on the Lightning, using Lightning wallet. And then they could cut down on their fees, and they could stack that Bitcoin just directly instead of having to exchange cash for it. There's all sorts of things that could happen in the future if they really begin to understand Bitcoin and implement it. I think the future of GameStop is much brighter now that this news has been publicized.
Well, Forrest, think about we posted a video recently on the channel here talking about risk-free ways to earn Bitcoin. One of those things was a game, Snake, Thunder Games. Imagine if GameStop, with their brand that they have and the relationships that they've built through the years with these gaming companies, imagine if they just built a better Thunder. We know how many people play games on their phones, and how much time people spend on their phones all day. Imagine if you could take a portion of that Bitcoin that they're buying today with that allocation of $4.7 billion and start building out these systems that actually pay people in sats. As time goes on, they were able to buy sats early. People are going to value them more in the future. And so I just think that there's a huge opportunity in things like that. And that's probably what they'll, consider down the road. But I don't think that they would ever get there if they kept putting off Bitcoin into the future. The big opportunity here is just buying it and waiting for the right opportunity, whether that is locations, whether that's new gaming platforms, whether that's mobile, who knows? But the point is they're buying future leverage right now. They're going to be able to allocate that capital for more purchasing power into the future.
Yeah. It's like how strategy is like there's no plan that they've outlined of what they're going to do with this Bitcoin. But at a certain point, they'll be able to do whatever they want. Do they want to become an insurance company? Do they want to become a bank, a bank for banks, an investment bank? I mean, I'd argue they're already an investment bank. They're creating investment products, but they are able to do whatever they want. So it's the same with GameStop. If they acquire a bunch of Bitcoin, that's going to allow them to have a huge runway. That's capital that they can collateralize if they want to go down that route. They could invest that in some sort of business opportunity at some point if they think that it can outperform Bitcoin, or if Bitcoin becomes less volatile and less productive. They can use that Bitcoin in whatever way they want. And I want to get a little bit into the game theory of this as well, because I think MSTR, some people know about MSTR even from it being a .com darling. But then for 20 years, it was basically nothing. It didn't have any volume. Nobody bought it. No one cared about this business. And only now people care about it because of Bitcoin. But even still, we're a pretty small niche around the world, and we don't have Hollywood movies being made about MSTR. Well, not yet, at least, but literally a year or two ago, Dumb Money came out, and there's been documentaries about GameStop, the GameStop rally. There's been all sorts of everybody knows about GameStop. And so I think that, strategy really was maybe the first domino to fall, but it kind of in slow motion. It took a long time for other dominoes to begin to fall. But now that GameStop is falling, I think that this could be another run of corporate game theory, of other corporations being like, well, if this works for GameStop, maybe we need to look internally and see if it'll work for us as well.
100%. I think that when we think about the game theory here, one thing that I've been kind of thinking about myself as a very small capital allocator myself, but that's what you do. You look at different opportunities, and I look at Bitcoin, I look at MicroStrategy or strategy, and I look at GameStop now as a realistic, allocation of capital for me. And the way I was kind of thinking about this, kind of going along the game theory here with Forrest's logic, is yes, strategy was first. Yes, they were able to accumulate the most Bitcoin. But as you think about this and as you play this out in your head, the fact that every company, whether it's GameStop, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Apple, every single time there's an announcement like this, that boosts MicroStrategy, because the demand for Bitcoin is going to continue to go up. And so to me, the game theory here is the earlier you get in on this, the more Bitcoin you have, as these balance sheets continue to be repriced using Bitcoin. The strategies, the Semlers, the GameStops, the people who are here first, every company that follows into the future, and they're coming, they will add value to the companies who already have done this. That's the game theory here. It's same with countries, same with people, but I think we're seeing it play out in real time now, which is wild.
Yeah, and over time, we're gonna see companies like GameStop, if they buy that 40,000 Bitcoin, they're gonna be at the top forever. If they manage it properly, if they increase their revenue, if they just find a way to hodl, they don't sell at the bottom. I mean, keep in mind, some of these companies are probably going to sell at the bottom. They're probably going to think, oh, Bitcoin is garbage. I don't know if they are. I don't know if GameStop is, based on what you were saying earlier, Jor, the unanimous. That's the key. Everybody is on board, and maybe they all understand what it is. Maybe some of them are just doing it because of authority bias, because they just see somebody else doing it. But it seems like it's very likely that they're going to hold. And I think that changes a lot. It changes how we think about GameStop. It changes how we think about Bitcoin. I think the opportunity to own a certain amount of Bitcoin is running out. I think people are massively underestimating what's happening right now. People are underestimating the US government buying however much Bitcoin they can. They're underestimating GameStop buying this however much Bitcoin they can. More and more entities are going to do this, and they're not going to sell until Bitcoin is not priced in dollars anymore. They're going to keep holding.
Yeah, I did a rough estimate here, just a search of public companies with even the amount of cash that could do something like what GameStop is doing, and it kind of really shows how unique of a position they're in. But there's only roughly between 150 to 200 public companies worldwide that have more than $4 billion of cash or cash equivalents. So GameStop is one of them, right? And they're a relatively small company with a lot of cash on hand, compared to a lot of the other ones in there. It probably skews like crazy. I know Berkshire Hathaway has like what 300 billion or something. Like they have a huge amount of cash and cash equivalents. So GameStop is in a unique spot here, and I think this is a bigger deal than maybe some people are realizing quite yet. I know the news is fresh, but I think that this is truly like a big step.
Yeah, I think it's also important to consider that if the sequence of events matters here. So if GameStop were to buy their Bitcoin first, and let's say at some point Berkshire Hathaway wants to buy Bitcoin as well. If GameStop buys first, then Berkshire Hathaway helps GameStop. If Berkshire Hathaway buys first, GameStop helps Berkshire Hathaway. You have to
Yeah.
think of it from both directions. Regardless of how much Bitcoin GameStop has to buy, they're going to be pumping the price up significantly. So what's going to happen is if they buy first and Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway ignore it for a long time, they're going to be paying significantly more. I wouldn't be surprised if Berkshire Hathaway does start buying if the price pumps up to $200,000, $300,000 pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, we're going to see this whole thing play out. I was just looking at this Bitcoin treasury thing here with the companies who hold Bitcoin now. And I'm not convinced anybody's going to catch MicroStrategy with the 500,000. I want you guys to think about this question here to kind of round out this episode. Is when you're allocating your own capital here, you got MicroStrategy as a pretty good option. You got Bitcoin as a pretty good option. You got now GameStop, which is going to be a good option here. But before you guys answer that, I want to just give a quick, a bit of a story here, I guess, in terms of how, as a business owner myself, how this has kind of changed my perspective on things, because I see a big orange button here on Bitcoin treasuries to add a company here. So I was just thinking about adding King Golf on there with our very small holdings. But I just want to share quickly kind of how my perspective has changed around this from King Golf's perspective. So we have been buying a little bit of Bitcoin with the profits that we've had. But historically, when I think about it 5 years ago, before I got into Bitcoin, our plan as a new business was to, tell as many people as possible, increase sales as fast as we possibly can, look 5 years down the road, see if we could sell that to a different company for more money, retire. That was kind of like the old school way of thinking before Bitcoin. But now it's completely changed in my way of seeing this now. And instead of investing a bunch into like advertising and social media stuff and different things, I just see that as kind of a waste at this point. I would much rather be buying Bitcoin and using that into the future as leverage. And so the way I see it now is every product we sell, we make a profit on that. And if we can put a portion of that profit into Bitcoin and use that Bitcoin treasury to fund the future, to have leverage into the future, I just see so much more opportunities versus trying to compete with everybody on Instagram and Facebook and all these different ads right now. It just doesn't make any sense. Why not just put that money, those additional profits, into Bitcoin, use it as future leverage, and then just like, with GameStop, when the opportunity comes, you're going to have that there for your business. So it just increases the longevity. It gets business owners, I think, thinking differently about this whole thing from a longer term view. And just like everything, Bitcoin changes the way we think about things. So on that, I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that, but in terms of somebody listening to this, what would you say? Strategy? I keep saying MicroStrategy. Strategy, GameStop, or Bitcoin?
I would
Okay.
say
Yeah.
Bitcoin, then strategy, then GameStop, because MicroStrategy already has that number one position, and that's going to give them a lot. I think that's going to change things for investors a lot. GameStop, I mean, we don't even know if GameStop is going to buy Bitcoin yet. It's all speculative at this point. Even if they say that they're willing to, who knows if they will. So Bitcoin first, Bitcoin as savings, MicroStrategy as an investment, GameStop as some speculative play.
That was well put right there. That's what I would say. It's just those are three different types of risks that you're taking on. Bitcoin's the safest, strategy's the second safest, and GameStop is pure speculation. You might outperform in the short term with GameStop, but in the long term, I think strategy still has quite a moat just with their options market, with their liquidity. They're roughly, they're in the top 10 most traded stocks daily, and options markets traded daily. That's an insane moat. And I think people don't really understand the need for a deep liquidity in those markets, because people are getting in and out of trades very quickly, and spreads will just eat them alive. So GameStop has a long way to go. They do have a lot of volatility. They do have the potential to really make a big impact. They could rocket up if they bought Bitcoin. It's really about how the market perceives that. Do they see it as a sign of strength? Do they think it's a good idea? Do they see it as, hey, your brick and mortar is totally failing, you're having to totally pivot into something else? It's really speculation. It's really, I mean, maybe if you're a little bit of a gambler, you could buy a couple GameStop shares, but ultimately all of this comes down back to the asset that both of those businesses are buying, which is Bitcoin, and you can actually own it. Even when you buy shares of GameStop and Strategy, you're having it custodied by a broker. You never take real ownership of those shares even. So buy Bitcoin is really what I'm getting down to.
Yeah.
That's the number one for sure.
Yep, that's a great point. Both great points. The thing that I would say on that is if you just look at this very objective math on this, strategy has 500,000 Bitcoin. We talked about the fact that there's only about 120 companies on Earth right now who have $4 billion worth of cash sitting around. So when you think about it like that, there's only 100 companies who could possibly get, 40,000 Bitcoin today?
It's 100 in the US. It's more like 100, and it says 120 to 200 worldwide that have more than 4 billion. Yeah.
So 4 billion gets you about 40,000, I think, best case Bitcoin, 40,000 Bitcoin. There's only about 100 companies, 150, maybe 200 even, very scarce. So that just shows, I think, it's not like MicroStrategy has been around for 20 years buying Bitcoin either. This all happened in 4 years where they put themselves that far ahead of everybody else. So I do think that's the one to get if you are looking at it as a investment, like Rajat said there. I think strategy is the one that'll be impossible to catch, I think. Yeah. And Bitcoin obviously is number one. The only drawback with Bitcoin obviously is that you do have to take some personal responsibility on. You do have to learn how to protect that Bitcoin, hold your own keys. So the convenience there is strategy. GameStop is speculative, but if you're willing to put in the time and you really want to be your own treasury reserve, then just get Bitcoin and hold it yourself and get rid of that third-party risk there. So any final thoughts here, boys?
I think we covered it all for now.
Good.
Yeah, this will be a moving parts in this one, I think. Yeah. It's fun. It's just so much fun to follow this play out. We're pretty lucky to be here during this time in history, and we're happy to be reporting on it. So I want to say a big shout out to everybody who has been sending in some Bitcoin. We've been receiving some small amounts, some large amounts to our QR code right beside Rajat's head there. So thank you to everybody who has been supporting the show here. We really want to keep this in our own voice, no ads, community funded. So that's the easiest way to do it, through the QR code there. And we appreciate all that have been sent so far. So thanks, fellas. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right.